So it's Sunday night here at the Hungarian Grand Prix, and I'm not sure there's been many kind of unpredictable Grand Prix and tenseness surrounding a kind of team orders issue, a 1-2 finish that in the past, normally when Red Bull finish 1-2 can be quite boring. But I think today we'll kind of go into the pantheon of similar to, well, not quite as bad as Multi-21, because that was someone ignoring team orders, but definitely a team order decision, definitely questions about drivers' interests versus teams' interests, and how McLaren panned out. So I mean, first of all, Alex, just explain to us how did McLaren turn what was looking like a cruise to a trouble 3-1-2 into something that was a bit more complicated to handle in the end?
Yeah, it all came down to the final round of pit stops, didn't it, John? But just very quickly, I think there's a case to be made that this is one of the best Grand Prix in a long time. If the British Grand Prix hadn't just been so spectacular, I think there'd be no case about it, or Canada being very interesting or whatever. But anyway, yeah, essentially, like I said, all boils down to that second round of pit stops. We knew it was going to be a 2-stop race because that's what it is around here with the tyre degradation factor, the thermal degradation factor, and things like that. But yeah, let's rewind though. I'm going to be a bit annoying and then jump around with the timeline. Turn 1, Oscar Piastri getting ahead of Lando Norris there. We'll even ignore Max Verstappen at this point because that's ultimately what plays out in the McLaren team orders situation, is that Piastri forced himself into effectively the winning position at the first corner, because this track, as we know, and historically there were some awful races here because it's very hard to overtake. Dirty air factor, significant here. So Piastri's in prime position to win the race, doing excellent time management. I spoke to Andrea Stella afterwards. He was very keen to highlight that. That's historically, well, not very long history, but historically been Piastri's problem. Keen to highlight how well he did. But basically what it boils down to is, and this is Piastri's own explanation, I think that's sort of we'll get into why I think that's the more key explanation, is because basically he said, with what was happening behind, with Max Verstappen having a tyre offset from the first round of pit stops, with Lewis Hamilton being very close behind as well, Charles Leclerc even in the mix, he wasn't definitely going to be a league battle contender, but he was there. McLaren basically went, right, we're going to cover Max Verstappen with Oscar Piastri, so we're going to let you go long, but because Hamilton's pitted for the second time already, we have to cover him with Lando. So that's what they did. But of course the undercut's power is so strong here, and by leaving Piastri out that extra little bit longer, I think there was perhaps a little pit stop as well, the discrepancy between the two drivers, Norris is going to come out ahead. Now, Stella's explanation is slightly different, and it's intriguing here because a lot of respect for Andrea Stella. He's a very clever man. He's obviously protecting his team here, but he's basically gone, we didn't want to add pressure to the mechanics. We didn't want to pile all the pressure on the pit stop. If we pitted Oscar first, if something had gone wrong, suddenly he's out of contention and Norris is at further risk of being undercut by Hamilton because he's been left out longer. So that's the official explanation. Haven't yet dug into the times, but just looking at it, the pace that McLaren had, it feels like that is a little bit sort of not the true reality, but I can understand why he would give that explanation. But yeah, it's incredible. It's just, I don't know. Do you agree with this sort of sentiment that it feels like a defeat when actually it's an amazing victory that actually feels different?
I'm not sure. I wouldn't call it a straight defeat. I think they made life much more complicated than needed. And I think this reminds me a little bit of Multi-21 in terms of what we understood on
and the Mark
Sunday.
Webber factor.
The Mark Webber factor. What we understand on the Sunday night in Malaysia when it all happened, and then it took us. I think I was at a music festival later on that week, and Kristen Horner phoned me up and was running me through everything that happened and how it all
hard at work,
working super hard. And then obviously Seb Vettel, the next race, China, unleashed everything. So it all came out. And I think maybe we're in a similar situation now because, McLaren, Zach Brown spoke on social media tonight saying we had a plan in place, it was all there, but if you have a plan in place, you execute it in Formula 1 and you do it ruthlessly. To say to Lando, can you maybe give it back when suits you best? That's not how Formula 1 teams work. You look at how Ferrari's operated in the past, how Mercedes has operated in the past. When it comes to these things, the order should have been crystal clear, the game plan should have been clear, and I think Lando debating and arguing and team putting a little bit of emotional
a lot I'd say
into it kind of tells me there wasn't the plan wasn't as clear as it should have been, and I think that's something they'll learn for the day. I mean, it's been a year of McLaren learning how to win races. Sometimes they've made mistakes and not won the race. Today they've won the race, and I think there's a learning exercise to come through. I spoke to Toto Wolff tonight. He said there's no doubt now McLaren will need absolutely strict rules of engagement between the two drivers, is what he did with Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg. This is how we do it. These are the battles. this is when I make the order, you follow it immediately, and that's where we go from there.
To a certain extent, Andrea Stella already committing to that in the mad media scrum in the McLaren tyre store, where he was sort of towering over us a little bit. He said basically, I think they really are in the title fight, considering, as we'll get onto, the sort of Red Bull struggles here. As soon as it becomes clear that one over the other is definitely the one hope, then team orders will be imposed. But considering how far ahead Max Verstappen is, that point is surely already here.
I mean, I would argue if Jean Todt was running Ferrari and had the same situation today with his drivers, they would have waved Lando through and let him go and do it. And unfortunately, that's the way the cookie crumbles, unfortunately. No. Whether that's right or wrong. And you can understand McLaren not wanting to have favouritism. I think if Lando had ignored the instructions, taken the win, troubles just erupts inside that team. And I think ultimately, however much, show how strong Lando is and how determined he is to win, you can't ignore a team. You can't ignore the effort of 1,000 people, getting up at 5 a.m. in the morning to work, working through to 2, 3 in the morning, day in, day out to make you a success. So you have to do what the team tells you to do. I think the issue is clear instructions.
Yeah, there certainly would have been no more questions about is Lando Norris too nice. I'm very glad he made the decision he did. I think that was the sporting, right, and almost moral thing to do. But it's interesting you mentioned Jean Todt. I think there's other sort of 2000s Ferrari era parallels about another driver who's central to the story of this race, Max Verstappen. I know it was a different era, and in terms of how things were broadcasted, team radios was famously for years when Michael Schumacher was dominating, weren't broadcast. But I just cannot believe that Michael Schumacher would have thrown his team so publicly under the bus as Max Verstappen did. So you spoke to Christian Horner. What's the response from Red Bull?
The response was quite interesting, because whenever a situation is tricky, he says this is a topic that's not discussed in the media. It will be discussed behind closed doors, which means there's obviously there is a problem to sort out. And I think things haven't been helped. We were told Max Verstappen was sim racing 3 o'clock this morning, which is another aspect. If you're fighting for a world championship, I mean, you can argue that it doesn't make any difference and he gets all these benefits from sim racing, but you shouldn't be racing. You shouldn't be doing stuff at 3 o'clock in the...
At the very least, it's a bad look, right?
Yeah.
People are talking about it. Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that, questions that has the tide now turned in terms of the championship, and is McLaren now in the driving seat, and it's now about optimising its performances and delivering these 1-2s all the time. I think Red Bull are on the back foot. They've brought a big upgrade this weekend. I don't think it's delivered all they hoped for.
No.
McLaren is bringing, brought this upgrade to Miami. There's been a few little tweaks here and there, but it just seems to be just adjusting it slightly, and the performance is coming. So I think you've got two teams in very different situations. And I think Max Verstappen finds himself in a place where 12 months ago, he could sit until 3 in the morning, didn't matter. He could rock up here, he could race around, he would win by 25 seconds, and it was all a bit easy. The question is now, how does he cope in a situation where Red Bull isn't the fastest? And especially if more upgrades come for Red Bull and they don't deliver.
Massively. Big weekend next weekend at Spa, which is where Red Bull has gone very well over the years. Now, the only other thing on our list of topics in our very professional notebook that we've got, and we certainly didn't just scribble them down just before we hit record on the camera, producer Jason, rest easy. The collision. I mean, this is why I say this race it's almost one for the ages, because narrative-wise, it had everything, including yet another Lewis Hamilton-Max Verstappen collision. Now, watching it live, and especially hearing Max Verstappen's, he was moving under braking radio call. I wonder, did I have a bit of sympathy for him there? Because Lewis does move, but then when after the steward's decision came in that there was going to be no further action for the crash, a minor crash, but the result of that was enough to penalise Max. Is there? Cool. Hamilton sees it as a racing incident. They won't back and rewatched it. And Lewis has, one, he's got to make a defence. That's perfectly acceptable. And two, he's got to get into the corner at some point. And Max is on the inside causing the problem. So yeah, I mean, what was your take?
I think probably as the steward said, you can argue Lewis could have avoided it, could have turned away, but equally he's a racing driver. He's fighting for a podium. He's fighting for a podium finish against perhaps his biggest career rival, arguably. And it's a situation where Mercedes has stepped up. Red Bull's on the back foot. These things are going to happen. I think Max was frustrated. He was frustrated by the car performance, frustrated by the strategy, because they allowed Mercedes and Leclerc to get the undercuts. They're always coming from behind. And I think it just all boiled over and got too much. But it sets things up beautifully for Spa, because if McLaren can get another 1-2 and Red Bull aren't scoring a lot, that Constructors' Championship is blown wide open. I think Red Bull already feel under threat there. And I think Max, Drivers' Championship, is going to feel that if they don't turn it around at a track they should be quick at, and they may even take an injury penalty, then it's going to be quite a hard slog after the summer break.
Massively. I mean, honestly, who would Who would have thought this, leaving Japan just for your race to go? Well, there we go. They're all packing down the paddock behind us. We'll see you in a week from the Belgian Grand Prix.